What's going on, everyone? I am the OPJellicent, and I have our draft analysis for season number 3 of the ICBA, the International Competitive Battling Association, our brand new Wi-Fi league that I was hinting about at the end of the IBA season. I believe I mentioned it in the last 3 weeks, but yeah, this is that league, and before we dive right into our draft, I actually wanted to address a few things. So first things, that's pretty obvious, our new brand. We do have a new brand change, the Toronto Leaf Storms. I know we literally just had a brand change over in the IBA to the Domino City Blackwings, but I know it's kind of silly, but I actually really wanted a team name that was based off of an actual city. So I decided to go with the Toronto Leaf Storms, and basically what I'm leading up to right here is I actually won't be using the Anastar City Agrons or the Domino City Blackwings in any upload draft leagues that I participate in. So I'll still be using them on the side if I ever participate in any fun leagues, but on the channel, I'm always going to be the Toronto Leaf Storms from now on. So that's pretty much what I wanted to address at the start of this video. The next thing that I wanted to go over before we get right into things was the tiering system for the ICBA. Now, the ICBA actually had what are called Ultra tiers. Now, there were 3 Ultra tiers, and they all contained Pokemon that you would normally find banned in standard draft league play, and also a lot of Pokemon that you would find mostly in the Smogon Ubers tier, in case that's where you're coming from. But pretty much what this allowed most of the coaches to do was draft a Pokemon from an S tier and draft around that. So I thought that was a really cool concept, and it was pretty much the biggest reason why I applied for the ICBA. And we did end up getting an S tier, but the reason you don't see the S tier on your screen right now is because my S tier was actually my Mega Evolution, so I didn't have to worry about that. Now, the only drawback to having an S tier Mega was that it actually still cut into your free point total, so you had even a smaller amount of points to still draft the exact same amount of 4 free picks. So that definitely came into play, as you guys will see right here. Now, getting into the first round, we actually had the 11th overall pick, which is not very great. It's in the middle, it's in the later half, and pretty much I couldn't grab anything in the highest Ultra tier, which contained Mega Metagross, Mega Blaziken, and Dawnwing's Necrozma, I believed. I definitely wanted to grab Mega Metagross, but unfortunately that went like really early. I also had my eyes set on Magearna, but that I believe went 1 or 2 picks before me. So when all this happened, I actually decided to hold off on my Ultra tier until round 2, and let's go ahead and get right into our first pick. So for my first overall pick, I actually ended up drafting Kieran Black. Now, I figured if I can't get the Ultra tier that I want, let's at least go ahead and draft one of the biggest threats in Tier 1, and just go ahead and hold off on our Ultra pick for a later round. Now, for those of you who have been following for a while, you probably know I have a ton of experience with this Pokemon, and this may sound kind of insane, but I actually have over 150 kills with this Pokemon alone in all my draft league seasons. I decided to make it one of my 3 Z-move users too, just because it gets a ton of coverage on both the physical and special side. It gets access to reliable Stab and Freeze Shock, Ice Beam, Dragon Claw, Outrage, and Draco Meteor. And it also gets access to Iron Head, Earth Power, Fusion Bolt, Shadow Claw, and also reliable recovery and roost. So overall, I'm excited to see what this mon can do for us this season. Let's go ahead and move on to our second pick. So since Magearna actually ended up getting sniped, I actually decided to draft the other Fairy Steel S tier in Mega Mawile. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys can see how scary this offensive core looks with Kieran Black plus Mega Mawile. The only thing that really wants to take on both are really bulky steel types. I also know both are rather slow, but we end up giving ourselves a ton of other options with our speed tiers later on, with Trick Room and Sticky Webs, as you guys are going to see. But Mega Mawile is also probably one of the most reliable late game cleaners in the draft league format, when it is allowed, obviously. But since after a Swords Dance, nothing really wants to take +2 Sucker Punches, but you do obviously have to be careful about a random substitute as well as opposing setup Pokemon. Now in this case, you can also run more of like, I guess the best way to explain it would be like a bulky hole puncher where you invest as much attack as you need to, since it's already really strong with its huge power as it is, and then you just end up investing the rest into bulk and just using it as like a slow, bulky, like a wall breaker, I guess you could say. But overall, I really think Mega Mawile plus Kieran Black is going to be a ton of fun, and let's go ahead and reveal our third pick. So heading into the third round, I knew I wanted some sort of reliable way to maintain speed control. I also realized that a lot of the hazard setters and the hazard removals were starting to go, so I really wanted to pick up some of that before that slipped by me, so I decided to go with the Psychic type Necrozma. I pretty much knew I wanted to use this mon since I joined my first Wi-Fi league, and I'm actually really glad I chose it this round because another coach informed me that I actually sniped him on this pick, meaning had I not picked it this round, I would have actually not gotten to use Necrozma this season, so we kind of picked it at the perfect time. I know I mentioned speed control right there, and both Kieran Black and Mega Mawile are actually in speed tiers that allow them to function under Trick Room, which Necrozma does get access to, so if we want to build around a team around that can be really reliable. Other than that, yeah, I really like how unpredictable it is. It can run so many different sets, such as a Trick Room or a Rock Polish Sweeper, a bulky Combine Cleaner, or just a pivot with Stealth Rocks, so I'm really excited to see how Necrozma does for the Leaf Storms, and let's go ahead and move on to round number 4. Alright, so moving into round number 4, I decided to dive into tier 3 and pick up Torrent Greninja. Now, this makes it so that I have access to all 3 hazards in Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and Stealth Rock now, since Greninja obviously does get the former of the 2. Other than that, it also gets Taunt, so it can be a really nice anti-lead. It also gets a really nice dual stab. It actually gets quite a few options there in Hydro Pump, Surf, Scald, and then on the dark side, you can go physical and special. You can run like Dark Pulse or Night Slash, that kind of thing. But other than that, it gets really decent coverage in Gunk Shot, Grass Knight, Ice Beam, as well as even Extra Sensor if you want to hit some poison types. But it also gets nice priority in both Shadow Sneak and Water Shuriken. So this is going to be my final Z-move user along with Kieran Black and Necrozma, which I think I forgot to mention when I went over Necrozma. But those are going to be my 3 Z-move users because all 3 of these get a ton of coverage, and I'm really excited to see how they do. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our 5th pick. So for my 5th overall pick, I really wanted to start grabbing some hazard control, since that was really getting off the board at this point in the draft. So I decided to go ahead and pick up Flygon. Now if you've been around since Season 3 of the UPC, you may actually remember that I had Kieran Black plus Flygon over there too. And a lot of the times if your opponent lacks a fairy type, which there's obviously a very limited pool of in the Draft League format, you can just go ahead and put a Choice Scarf on both of these mons and just click Outrage, and if one of them ends up hitting themselves in confusion, just go out into the other one and clean up. So that can be a really nice they can be really nice dual Scarfers a lot of the time, but it also gets access to Dragon Dance, which in Generation 7, which I don't see myself using a ton, just because a lot of times if you want your Dragon Dance user to be a Z-move user too, but I really needed Z-moves on Necrozma, Kieran Black, and Greninja, so I don't see myself bringing that set quite a lot. Also with the Choice Scarf set, you can kind of use it as like a scarf to lead and U-turn out, scout the set, and just bring in something that can respond. You do obviously have to be careful about opposing Choice Scarf users though, but those are just some of the scenarios that I see working out for Flygon this season. But overall, I'm just really glad I ended up picking up some hazard control soon. And let's just go ahead and move on to our 6th pick. So for my 6th pick, I decided since we just went ahead and picked up some hazard control, I figured we would just go ahead and draft our fire type now, since a lot of those were starting to go at this point. I believe Darmanitan went a few picks before me, or a few picks after me, and Delphox went at some point that round too. So I decided I would go ahead and pick up Ante, since I could still afford it in the tier 2. And this thing is one of the strongest wall breakers in the tier, and it allows me to form a Volt Turn team with Kieran Black and Volt Turn core with Greninja and a later pick, as you guys will see, if I want to go that route and the matchup works out for it. But it's also super scary under Sticky Webs because, spoilers, I do end up drafting that later too, just because since it's often forced to turn an Adamant nature for Sacred Fire and Extreme Speed, Adamant Sacred Fires under Sticky Webs, there's not much that wants to switch into that, so I'm really hoping this can do a lot. I know it's pretty one-dimensional. You could argue it's pretty one-dimensional just because a lot of the times you're either running AV or Choice Band, but I still think it's really good at what it does, and I'm just really excited to use it. So let's go ahead and move on to round number 7. Now, heading into round number 7, the way it worked out was, since I ended up drafting Mega Mawile, I could actually only grab 1 tier 4 and then 4 tier 5s at this point, so I really wanted an electric type, and there was a few I was looking at. Rotomfan was in tier 5, Electivire was in tier 4, but I actually ended up going with Electros, and one of my favorite aspects of this mon is how consistent it is at giving you momentum, just because it gets access to both the U-turn and Volt Switch, and since its speed stat isn't very high, a lot of the times you can have Electros take the hit and then U-turn / Volt Switch out, and then you get momentum into anything that you want. For example, my Kieran Black and Ante, or Ante, which are both really nice wall breakers. So hopefully we can have that scenario work out in a few matches. But other than that, it's a nice Assault Vest mon, which makes my team a lot bulkier just because it's pretty frail at this point. It also gets decent coverage in Flamethrower, Drain Punch, Knockoff, Aqua Tail, and a few other moves. And I just think it'll act as a really nice bulky pivot that can help bring a lot of my builds together. Let's go ahead and move on to our 8th pick. So for my 8th overall pick, I could actually only draft tier 5s at this point since I had already used my tier 4 on Electros. So I decided I would go ahead and draft those Sticky Webs this round, which I mentioned earlier in Leavanny. Now, as a Sticky Webber, I really like Leavanny. I had it back in, I believe, IBA Season 2, and it was really reliable, and it was one of the biggest reasons why I managed to take that team all the way to the conference finals. Now, obviously, I mentioned how everything else does well under Sticky Webs, Kieran Black, and Ante, and even Mega Mawile, depending on how fast your opponent's roster is, but Sticky Webs will also force my opponent to prep for both Trick Room and Sticky Webs, which can be really tough since obviously you want fast mons for Sticky Webs, but you want slow mons for Trick Room, so that'll definitely force some 50-50s in prep, I guess. But other than that, it also gets some utility in Screens, Magic Coat, Knockoff, which really just helps its suicide lead aspect out, but obviously its main job is to get up those webs. But that's really all there is to say about Leavanny. Let's just go ahead and move on to round number 9. So for round number 9, there wasn't really a ton of tier 5s left on the board that really caught my attention. There was still Zangoose Zangoose, which is definitely a scary threat under sticky webs with its guts boosted attacks, but I actually decided to go with Kangaskhan for the extra bulk as well as all the utility options it gets. It is a pretty reliable wish passer, it does get access to wish, so it can pass some pretty nice wishes with its base 105 HP stat. It also hits decently hard with its stab double edges coming off of a base 95 attack, so not the highest stat, but it can definitely do some wall breaking, so like a choice band set could be viable. Alternatively, you could also run like a bulky wish set with probably body slam just to fish for paralysis because you don't want to take a recoil damage on obviously your bulky sets, or you can just run return if you do want that extra power. But really, it's kind of a niche mon. It's definitely pretty situational, but I can definitely see myself bringing it if the matchup works out. And let's go ahead and move on to round number 10. So for my second to last pick, I actually decided to go with a second electric type in Rotomfan, which is definitely an interesting option. My mindset behind it was it offers me a faster Voltage user unlike Elektras, but I can even choice Scarf, and I can form a nice faster Volt turn core with Greninja, just to help me get on those heavy hitters like Kieran Black and Ante. Other than that, it also gives me another hazard control option, which right now I only have Flagon, but it's obviously less reliable since Rotomfan itself is weak to hazards, well, Stealth Rocks in particular. It actually has decent bulk with base 107 defense and Spadaf, but its really low HP stat kind of holds it back in that regard, but that really low HP stat can also take advantage of its utility option in Pain Split, because if you get put at a really low HP number, you can go to Pain Split and get back to a really high HP percentage. It also gets utility in Will-O-Wisp and decent coverage in Dark Pulse, Shadow Bolt, and Signal Beam, but I really just see myself using it as a fast pivot with Defog. But that's really all to say about Rotomfan. Let's go ahead and move on to my final pick. So finally, for my last pick, I decided to go ahead and double up on water types too and pick up Gorbiess. Now, just to clarify, baton passing Shell Smash boost is in fact banned, but I've actually seen Gorbiess sweep on its own numerous times in the GBA. I believe it swept a bit in the UCL too, but if you give it a focus sash and you predict their switch out, you can even get 2 Shell Smashes up, and if they don't have many priority options that are multi-hitting attacks at that point, you could be good to go and just sweep through your opponent's roster. But that's really the extent of what Gorbiess does. Maybe it can come through a few times throughout the season, but that is going to wrap up the Leaf Storm's roster for this season of the ICBA. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. What Pokemon do you think is going to lead the kill this season? And what do you think our record is going to be? There are 10 weeks. And yeah, also be sure to go ahead and check out all the other coaches down below in the description, and check out their draft analysis too, and see what they're working with. But be sure to go ahead and subscribe if you want to follow the Leaf Storms throughout the season. Week 1 matches will be going live from a week from when this video goes up, and I'll see you guys then. Later.